Chuck Grassley and Senator Lindsey Graham have now, right here, they have been unredacted. The information is beyond stunning. It offers more evidence, more proof that the FBI lied to the FISA court to get the warrant to spy on the Trump campaign, and it was the bulk, the biggest part of their application. Now, we're going through this all very slowly tonight. That's our breaking news opening monologue. All right, in my hands, brand new at this hour, bombshell revelations from the Grassley-Graham memo. Major parts, this is the memo from yesterday, have now been unredacted. Huge parts yesterday. Now the memo is providing further evidence that the FISA court was lied to by the FBI in order to get a warrant to spy on the Trump campaign. And there's new information that Christopher Steele may have lied to the FBI about briefing media outlets. There's a lot to cover. We're going to go through it slowly. We'll do it together. Now, the memo starts with this. This is page 1 of the memo right here. On the face, the dossier, it appears that Mr. Steele gathered much of his information from Russian government sources inside of Russia. And according to the law firm Perkins Coie, Mr. Steele's dossier-related efforts were funded through Fusion GPS by that law firm on behalf of the Democratic National Committee and the Clinton campaign. Let's pause here. Hillary Clinton is paying Steele to spread Russian lies and Russian propaganda. I'll read it again because this is important. Much of the information from Russian government sources inside of Russia. Isn't that what the media has been investigating for the better part of a year here? Oh, so keep that in mind as we move forward. Here's another key portion. It appears that either Mr. Steele lied to the FBI or to the British court that the classified documents reviewed by the committee contain materially false statements. And then the memo goes on to read, in response to the committee's inquiries, the chairman and ranking member received a briefing March 15, 2017, from then Director James Comey. Then the memo goes on to say that briefing addressed the Russia investigation, the FBI's relationship with Mr. Steele, and the FBI's reliance on Mr. Steele's dossier in 2 applications that it filed for surveillance under the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act. Then, March 17th, 2017, the chairman and ranking member were provided copies of the 2 relevant FISA applications which requested authority to conduct surveillance of Carter Page. Both relied heavily on Mr. Steele's dossier claims, and both applications were granted by the Foreign Intelligence Court. In December 2017, the chairman, ranking member, and subcommittee chairman Graham were allowed to review a total of 4 FISA applications relying on the dossier to seek surveillance of Mr. Carter Page, as well as numerous other FBI documents related to Mr. Steele. Now, the next paragraph, this is interesting. This is highly redacted here. I wonder what's in that. Then the following paragraph, follow along. Similarly, in June of 2017, the former FBI Director Comey testified publicly before the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence that he had briefed President-elect Trump on the dossier's allegations in January, when he was president-elect, just before he was sworn into office, January 2017, which Mr. Comey described to then President-elect Trump as salacious and unverified. When asked at the March 2017 briefing why the FBI then relied on the dossier in the FISA applications, absent meaningful corroboration and in the light of the highly political motives surrounding its creation, then Director Comey stated that the FBI included the dossier allegations about Carter Page in the FISA applications because Mr. Steele himself was considered reliable due to his past work with the FBI. Now, later on that page, memo reads, it goes, the bulk, pay close attention, the bulk of the FISA application, put that back up on the screen, consists of allegations against Page that were disclosed to the FBI by Mr. Steele and also outlined in the Steele dossier. The application appears to contain no additional information corroborating the dossier allegations against Mr. Page, although it does cite to a news article that appears to be sourced to Mr. Steele's dossier as well. Let's just stop right here. The entire bulk of the FISA application came from the dossier. this dossier, well, they're relying on a guy that was being paid for by the Clinton campaign and by the DNC, funneling the money. Fusion GPS got the money through the law firm both the DNC and the Clinton campaign used. There was no verification of any of this. It was just based on the dossier. And the fact that they say, well, he was reliable in the past. And then imagine this. In October, when they filed for the first application for FISA against the Trump campaign, well, 3 months later in January, James Comey is saying that it's salacious and unverified. So why 3 months earlier did they go before a FISA court and present it as the bulk of evidence? Do you see where we're going here? Now, here's what page 3 of this memo says. Redacted. The FBI discussed the reliability of the unverified information provided by Mr. Steele in footnotes 8 and 18 of the FISA warrant application. First, the FBI noted a vaguely limited extent the political origins of the dossier. Stop right there. They knew it was funded by Hillary Clinton and the DNC. They never told the FISA court that important piece of information. I think the FISA court probably would have made a big impression, considering this is the bulk of their case, the dossier, if it was coming from one campaign against another campaign in the lead up to an election. Now, in footnote 8, the FBI stated the dossier information was compiled pursuant to the direction of a law firm who had hired an identified U.S. person, now known as Glenn Simpson, Fusion GPS, then redacted. The application failed to disclose that the identities of Mr. Simpson's ultimate clients were the Clinton campaign and the DNC. Why would the FBI, in making a FISA application against an opposition party in an election year and knowing it's paid for by the Clinton campaign and the DNC, why would they not tell the FISA court judge? That, to me, is a serious omission, and one that states there's a political motive behind all of this. Now, let's just go back a little further. Remember, this is the same James Comey, this is the same FBI that, in fact, in spite of a mountain of evidence that Hillary Clinton mishandled classified information, destroyed and deleted 33,000 subpoenaed emails, and then used acid wash, and then bleach bit, and then busted up, different devices with hammers. The same people that kept her in the race are now working on her behalf again, and they're doing it in this case by not telling the full truth to the FISA court. We continue. The FBI stated to the FISA court that based on Steele's previous reporting and history with the FBI, whereby Steele provided reliable information to the FBI believes Steele's reporting to be credible. In short, it appears the FBI relied on admittedly uncorroborated information funded by and obtained for Secretary Clinton's presidential campaign in order to conduct surveillance of an associate of an opposing presidential candidate. It did. This is right here in this, right here. It did so based on Mr. Steele's personal credibility and presumably having faith in his process of obtaining information. Wow. They didn't tell the court any of this. They didn't tell the court where the money came from. They didn't tell the court. They also knew at that time that Steele hated Trump because Steele mentioned it to Bruce Orr. We'll get to that in a minute. But there is substantial evidence suggesting that Mr. Steele materially misled the FBI about a key aspect of his dossier efforts, one which bears on his credibility. And it starts redacted. Yet the FISA applications note the existence of a news article dated September 23rd, 2016, which in particular contained some of the same dossier information about Mr. Page compiled by Mr. Steele, on which the FBI relied in its application. While not explicitly stated, this is presumably the article written by Michael Isikoff, Yahoo News, titled U.S. Intel Officials Probe Ties Between Trump Advisor and Kremlin. Now, redacted, the application attempts to explain away the inconsistency between Steele's assertion to the FBI and the existence of the article apparently 2017 application. This is the first renewal of the FISA warrant. In this case, for Mr. Page, the FBI again addressed Mr. Steele's credibility. This is 3 months later. Remember, that's the same January where James Comey told President Trump it's salacious and it's unverified. So that same month, they go in for a renewal. Back to the document. The FBI noted that it had suspended their relationship with Mr. Steele in October of 2016 because of Steele's, quote, unauthorized disclosure of information to the press. Now, the FBI relayed that Steele had been bothered by the FBI's notification to Congress in October of 2016 about the reopening of the Clinton investigation. Remember, that happened just before the election. And as a result, Steele independently and against prior admonishment from the FBI to speak with only the FBI on this matter, released the reporting discussed herein, dossier allegations against Page to an identified news organization. However, the FBI continued to still cite Mr. Steele's past work as evidence 3 months later of his reliability. At the same time, they're telling Donald Trump it's unverified, it's salacious. And that incident that led to the FBI suspending their relationship with Mr. Steele occurred after Steele provided the FBI with the dossier information described in the application. Now, the FBI further asserted in footnote 19 that it did not believe that Steele directly gave information to Yahoo News that published the September 23rd news article. Now, in the next paragraph, this is what it reads. In defending Mr. Steele's credibility to the FISA court, the FBI had posted an innocuous explanation for the September 23rd article based on the assumption that Mr. Steele had told the FBI the truth about his press contacts, and the FBI then vouched for him twice more, using the same rationale in subsequent renewal applications, filed with the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court in April and in June of 2017. Now, here's the important part of page 5. The first of these filings was publicly reported in the U.S. media in April of 2017. Yet, the FBI did not subsequently disclose to the FISA court the evidence suggesting that Steele had lied to the FBI. Instead, the application still relied primarily, remember, the bulk of the application is the phony Clinton bought and paid for dossier. Go back, just scroll down just a hair back the other way. The bulk of the application. So instead, the application still, we're now 6 months into this thing, relied on his credibility, even though the FBI knew he was not credible at this point, especially as it relates to the media incident, which pushed him out of the FBI's way in October, the same month the first FISA warrant was granted. Now, here's what's on page 6. Whether Mr. Steele lied to the FBI about his media contacts is relevant for at least 2 reasons. First, it's relevant to his credibility as a source, particularly given the lack of corroboration for his claims, at least at the time they were included in the FISA applications. Second, it is relevant to the reliability of his information gathering efforts. Mr. Steele conducted his work for Fusion GPS, compiling the pre-election memoranda between June and early November 2016. Now, there was this British litigation. This talks about it in the Grassley and Graham memo here tonight. Mr. Steele acknowledged briefing journalists about the dossier memorandum in late summer, autumn 2016. Yeah, he was the source for Isikoff. Now, unsurprisingly, during the summer of 2016, reports of at least some of the dossier allegations began to circulating among reporters and people involved in Russia issues. Mr. Steele also admitted in the British litigation to briefing journalists from the Washington Post, Yahoo News, The New Yorker, the whole network, fake news, CNN, in September of 2016. Simply put, the more people who contemporaneously knew that Mr. Steele was compiling his dossier, the more likely it was vulnerable to manipulation. In fact, in the British litigation, which involves a post-election dossier memorandum, Steele admitted he had received and included it in unsolicited, unverified allegations. That filing implies that he similarly received unsolicited intelligence on these matters prior to the election as well, stating that Mr. Steele continued to receive unsolicited intelligence, now pay close attention, on matters covered by the pre-election memorandum after the U.S. presidential election. Now, the next paragraph's redacted. It goes on. One memorandum by Mr. Steele that was not published by BuzzFeed is dated October 19, 2016. The report alleges, redacted as well, redacted, Mr. Steele's memorandum states that his company received this report, redacted, U.S. State Department, that the report was the second in a series, and that the report, pay close attention, was information that came from a foreign subsource who is in touch with, redacted, a contact of, redacted, a friend of the Clintons who passed it to, redacted. I love the redacteds here. It is troubling enough the Clinton campaign funded Steele's work, but that now Clinton associates, as we reported last night, were contemporaneously feeding Mr. Steele allegations. This raises additional concern about his credibility. Let's head to page 7. These facts appear to directly contradict the FBI's assertions in its initial application in October of 2016 for the FISA warrant, as well as subsequent renewal applications. The FBI repeatedly represented to the FISA court that Mr. Steele told the FBI he did not have unauthorized contacts with the press about the dossier prior to October 2016. That's false. The FISA applications make these claims specifically in the context of the September 2016 Yahoo News article, but Mr. Steele has admitted publicly before a court of law that he did have such contacts with the press at this time, and his former business partner, Mr. Simpson, had confirmed it to the committee. Thus, the FISA applications are either materially false in claiming that Mr. Steele said he did not provide dossier information to the press prior to October 2016, or Mr. Steele made materially false statements to the FBI when he claimed he only provided the dossier information to his business partner in the FBI. And page 7 continues. In this case, Steele's apparent deception seems to have posed significant material consequences on the FBI's investigative decision and representations to the FISA court. And Steele's information formed a significant portion of the FBI warrant application. FISA application relied more heavily on Steele's credibility than on any independent verification or corroboration for his claims. Thus, the basis for the warrant authorizing surveillance on a U.S. citizen largely rests on Mr. Steele's credibility. And the Department of Justice has a responsibility to determine whether Mr. Steele provided false information to the FBI and whether the FBI's representations to the court were in error. A lot to absorb. But this is it. Joining us now, former Deputy Assistant to the President, Fox News National Security Strategist Sebastian Gorka, Fox News contributor Sarah Carter, Fox News legal analyst Greg Jarrett. Let me start with you on the legal side. The bulk of the application, what they didn't add here, which was in the Nunes House Intel memo, Steele, before the election, was known to hate Donald Trump. Very important key. So the bulk of information that the FBI gave to the FISA court was the Steele dossier, which we know was unverified, which Comey said in January to Trump was unverified, but they used it anyway.
Right.
What does this tell you?
It tells you need a calculator to add up all the various crimes that were committed by the Department of Justice and the FBI. They concealed vital facts to the court. They deceived the judge in getting the warrant approval. They knew that the dossier was phony. It was politically motivated. They knew that Steele was biased and untrustworthy and had lied. So when they signed under penalty of perjury in front of the judge that these are true and honest and credible documents, they were therefore lying, committing perjury. And for every lie in this 8 pages that you've identified, it's a separate crime.
It's a separate crime.
Yes.
James Comey committed crimes?
As I read this document, he deceived the court, committing a crime.
So the bulk of the warrant was based on unverified information bought and paid for by the Clinton campaign against an opposing candidate that they never corroborated.
That's correct. There is some.
Is that how things work?
Well, apparently that's how the Comey FBI was working, and the Department of Justice and the Obama administration.
Sarah, last night you were talking about the redacted names here, but information coming from Clinton campaign sources. I read it and I'd love to see the names in there in those redacted parts. I read it that Clinton friends and associates were feeding Christopher Steele information, and he was running with it. And then that became part of the dossier, which became the bulk of the FISA warrant.
That appears to be the case, Sean, and this is very concerning because not only was Christopher Steele informing other reporters, talking to other reporters on background, lying the whole way through, but he was collecting information. Remember, by this point, the Russians probably, and I've said this before, already knew who was paying Christopher Steele, who was paying Fusion GPS. They knew about the HRC campaign. They understood that the DNC was paying for this as well. And so they were feeding him these false allegations, which he wasn't even corroborating, which he was putting into this dossier. And then twofold, to be taking information, it appears, from close friends of the Clintons, and I have been told, and I know other members of Congress have spoken this already, from Sidney Blumenthal and others, Cody Shear, and then using that information in the dossier to corroborate.
What about Comey's flimsy excuse? Well, he had given us good information in the past. Doesn't it, before the FBI, Sebastian, goes, Dr. Gorka, goes before a FISA court applying to spy on an opposition candidate, they downplay who paid for it. They purposely hide that from the court. But don't they have some obligation to see if it's true at all? Beyond, oh, we like this guy, we worked with him in the past?
They have an obligation to verify that the information in the application for the warrant is legal. Mark Levin said it right. With this document, it's proven that Hillary Clinton bought a warrant to spy on an American.
Stay on that thought. She bought a warrant. We'll pick it up. Our panel stays with us and much more. Where do you see this tape of Congressman Adam Schiff? Straight ahead. Okay. Back to this unredacted Senate memo that just came out literally as we're coming on the air tonight. We're going through it with you at home as well. All right, so Hillary Clinton bought and paid for what they describe, and this is, I think, so important, that it appears Mr. Steele gathered much of his information from Russian government sources inside of Russia. They funneled the money through this law firm, Perkins Coie. Steele's dossier-related efforts were funded through Fusion GPS on behalf of the Clinton campaign and the DNC. So it's a bought and paid for Hillary Clinton Russian government source document that then becomes not only to lie to the American people during the election. Then we find out that Clinton associates, Dr. Gorka, are feeding even more information to Christopher Steele. The bulk of the FISA warrant, we learned tonight, was based on this entire Russian dossier, and that it had unverified information. It all turns out to be lies. And Comey's answer is, well, we trusted him because we used him in the past, and they didn't verify. I know people in the FBI. This is not how the FBI operates. This is not how our intelligence operates. The 99% of good people that serve this country, I am certain, are livid about this tonight, because this was an attempt to steal an election. And then later, as it's renewed, it was an attempt to undermine a duly elected president of the United States. And by the way, to my idiotic, overpaid colleagues that call themselves journalists, as they've been pushing a narrative that's been false for a year, they've missed the biggest story of their career. Because now this is verified tonight. Dr. Gorka.
This is the biggest story, not of just their career, but of modern politics. I want to put this into perspective and crunch everything down that you've said into a bumper sticker. Watergate was the big story, yes, for decades. A bungled burglary by some hired thugs, okay? This isn't a bungled burglary. Listen to the names. McCabe, Deputy Director. Peter Strzok, Lisa Page, Bruce Orr. This is a conspiracy inside the Department of Justice, inside the FBI. The largest redacted portion of the Grassley memo is about Bruce Orr and his wife, and it discusses the fact that Bruce Orr, senior DOJ employee, has a wife who works for GPS Fusion, who is working on the Steele dossier. Can we just let that sink in for a second?
The bulk of the application was the Clinton bought and paid for dossier.
We have the people at the highest levels of federal law enforcement and the intelligence community and justice lying to get a warrant to spy on an American. And let's talk about the most trenchant fact of all. This man who was spied upon is walking free today, which means what? There was nothing there. This was about a political smear campaign against a presidential candidate, Sean.
I can't believe this happened, Sarah, in the United States of America.
Well,
I cannot believe that this was allowed to happen. And the great irony is this is Russian paid for, Russian government propaganda and lies that she paid for, and it became the bulk of a FISA warrant to spy on an opposition party candidate just prior to an election and an incoming president-elect. What other evidence now do we need?
I don't know. I mean, I think we need to dig deeper. I don't think it ends with Carter Page. This was the weaponization of our intelligence tools, of our intelligence apparatus, and this needs to be thoroughly investigated. It should not end with Carter Page. And Sean, one more point. The FBI knew, according to all of the sources that I spoke with, they knew they knew that Christopher Steele lied to them. They knew that, and they didn't pay him. Remember, they were going to give him a big bulk payment, and they stopped that. So they knew he was lying, yet they go to the FISC, they go to the FISA court, and they put in this application,
so
and they don't tell the court.
They won't pay him,
That's
but
right.
they vouch for him. They never mention in the FISA court how much Steele hates Trump. They never mention that this is paid for by Clinton and her campaign in the DNC. They're purposely lying to a court, Greg Jarrett. They're lying to a FISA court. FISA, of course, means, okay, secret, right, top secret, spy on American citizens, on this case, a presidential candidate, but all the information is coming from your opponent. Why bother to tell the judge that part?
There were so many chances for the FBI and the Department of Justice to do the right thing, and at every turn, time after time, they did the wrong thing.
Who's in legal jeopardy tonight, Greg Jarrett?
Anybody who signed off on this FISA warrant under penalty of perjury, anybody who represented themselves as an officer of the court and then committed a fraud on the court. When they first learned that all of this came from the Russians, experts on lies and deception, they should have said, Mr. Steele, goodbye, and take your dossier with you.
The irony, real quick, we're running out of time. The irony of all of this is Hillary Clinton paid for Russian lies, Dr. Gorka and Sarah.
The collusion, Russian collusion is right here. It's right here. This is your Russian collusion. Hillary Clinton, her lawyers, the DNC, and the DOJ under Obama. There it is, Sean.
Sarah, I mean, that's the irony of all of this. And the media betrayed the American people, a huge part of this story. They never had any facts. They hyped it up. They breathlessly reported false information day after day, night after night.
And I think now, and hopefully now, they start reporting the truth.
Don't
At
hold your
least
breath.
that's what I hope for.
No,
and we have to wait for the IG.
You. They'll attack me, Greg, and Dr.
Brian
Gorka.
Stelter surrendered, right? I mean, Brian Stelter
but the
surrendered.
facts are the facts, Sean. The facts are the facts.
Good point. Last word, Greg. We got to roll.
People out there at the Department of Justice and FBI, even those who've left, better have good criminal lawyers representing them.
We need, if Jeff Sessions, we need a special counsel. We need it now. Read this report. When we come back, Dan Bongino, Lanny Davis weigh in. Then later, Jessica Tarlov, Jesse Waters. You got to see this, Congressman. Adam Schiff got pranked by Russian comedians promising dirt on President Trump. Oh, I thought that was bad if you could get and offer dirt from Russia. That's next. Finds us. He has been going through this Grassley memo that has now been unredacted. All right, Ed, from your side, we went over a lot of it. What caught your attention?
Well, Sean, what's interesting as well is that this is a criminal referral that Republican Senator Chuck Grassley last month had sent to the Justice Department about Christopher Steele. What would be the potential crime? Well, Grassley is saying in this referral that it would be that Steele may have lied to the FBI. Lied about what? Lied about his contacts with the media, Yahoo News and Mother Jones Magazine, for example, because this document, this Grassley memo, is saying that Steele represented to the FBI that he had not talked to anyone in the media about the dossier. And so then the FBI took that he was reliable and he had not spoken to the media and went to the FISA court with the application to get a warrant for surveillance of Carter Page, as we've been reporting. Well, in this memo, Grassley says, quote, the FBI already believed Mr. Steele was reliable. He had previously told the FBI he had not shared the information with the press, and lying to the FBI is a crime, referring to the fact that Christopher Steele, despite representing that to the FBI, that he had not spoken to the media, did speak at least to Yahoo News and Mother Jones about the dossier, and then those stories appeared. On top of that, the Grassley memo tonight now goes on to say that, in fact, the FBI then went back after learning that, wait a second, Christopher Steele misrepresented things and did talk to the media. The FBI never disclosed that to the FISA court, Sean. So they kept going back for renewals of the surveillance warrant and didn't say to the court, according to Republican Senator Grassley's memo, that, look, things have changed. We no longer think he's reliable. He lied to us. He spoke to the media. So that's a problem potentially for Christopher Steele, potentially a crime of lying to the FBI, but also potentially another problem for the FBI, misrepresenting things to the FISA court, Sean.
But not for the rank and file. We always got to make that distinction. These were a few people at the top.
The leadership who went to the FISA court.
Exactly. And I'm just saying that because I don't want to taint these guys that work to save our country every day. Great report. Ed Henry in Washington.
Okay, thanks,
Thank you for being with us. All right, joining us now, former Secret Service agent Dan Bongino, and also with us. I quoted his next book for years, you know, Tell the Truth, Tell It All, Tell It Early, Tell It Yourself. Well, he's back. He's got a brand new book, Lanny Davis. It's called The Making of the President, 2016, How the FBI Director James Comey Cost Hillary Clinton the Presidency. Okay, I disagree with the conclusion, but you are a good writer. I love the book. Former White House Special Counsel to the President, Lanny Davis. Here's what we know in this case. Now, we can't even argue politics, especially with the Clintons, because you just love the Clintons. But here's what we do know tonight, and I think you'll agree, actually. So we know that what they're reporting in the Senate report is that Mr. Steele gathered much of his information from Russian government sources inside of Russia. We also know that Hillary associates, according to this memo tonight, also were feeding Steele information. We know that Steele was paid by Clinton and the DNC through the law firm. Then we know the bulk of the FISA that was brought on Page in the Trump campaign was because of the Steele dossier, not verified, paid for by an opposition candidate, unverified information. Did you ever hear of anything like this in your life?
I've never heard anything the way you described it in my life.
Okay, but the reality is unverified information that came from Russia, of all places, and that was paid for. Clinton paid for the dossier. That's a fact. It's indisputable. It's incontrovertible.
So let me get.
And then it was used to apply for a FISA warrant and became the bulk of the FISA application.
Let me get this straight. This theory is based upon upper-level FBI management, not the rank and file.
Not the rank and file. Correct.
James Comey, who literally wrote a letter 11 days from an election that I prove in my book, Cost to the Presidency. This is a left-wing conspiracy of FBI agents.
Dan,
seriously?
Listen, with all due respect, this is a problem because these are the same people, Dan Bongino, that overlooked her mishandling of classified information, her deleting of 33,000 emails, acid wash bleach pit, and then busting up devices so that she could continue. They wrote an exoneration before an investigation. The investigation happened in July. They were writing the exoneration in May.
I'll explain that if you want.
Yeah, it's interesting, by the way, how Lanny never answered your question and immediately went to the conspiracy theory, look at the red squirrel thing. But, Sean, let's stop calling this the Steele dossier, okay? It's not. It's the Clinton dossier. The information, if you read the memo tonight, is damning. Hillary Clinton's team essentially hijacked the FBI and the DOJ to use it to launder information they were giving to a former British spy to get it in front of a judge to spy on their political opponent. That's not in dispute anymore after tonight, okay? The real conspiracy theory are people like Lanny calling it a conspiracy theory, because we now know this happened. This is so deeply disturbing, I can't believe he's not horrified by it.
But wait a minute.
I'll respond if you want, Dan, but I'm not sure you want me to.
To get a warrant on an opposing candidate with information paid for by the other candidate that's not verified, that turns out to be Russian sources, I would think you want election integrity. That's what your book is all about. Why doesn't this bother you as much?
Well, let's start with the fact that there is a Republican Attorney General who isn't exactly
recused himself,
who isn't exactly listening to you, and a Republican Deputy Attorney General who Donald Trump praised isn't exactly listening to you and Greg, and with all due respect to Dan. And what is a red squirrel? I'm not sure about your analogy, but I did say.
All right, I'm going to say this because I got to go.
There is a need for due process, and you guys convict people on the air rather than letting the facts come out.
Adam Schiff.
He still didn't answer the question,
Next.
by the way.
From Director Clinton.